This is not a flex. This is not a growth hack. This is documentation in real time. Before we go any further, I want to set the frame for the entire series, because if we don't do this now, everything that follows gets misunderstood. I've said this before and I'll say it again clearly. Subscriber counts, download numbers, and views are not the mission. They are not success. They are not impact. They are not the reason to create. What they are is feedback. They tell you whether your message is landing, whether your distribution system is working, and whether the market understands what you're trying to say. So when I say the road to 100, I'm not saying 100 subscribers equals success. I'm saying if I can't intentionally earn the first 100, I have no business talking about scale. This series is about building correctly, not loudly. Before we get started, a quick but important disclaimer. Everything we discuss in this episode is for educational and informational purposes only. This content reflects personal opinions, experiences, and general business principles, not financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. You should always consult a qualified professional before making decisions related to your business, finances, or personal situation. Any actions you take based on this content are done at your own discretion and risk. Past performances, strategies, or examples discussed do not guarantee future results. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Let me give you some real context, because this is not my first attempt at building a podcast. Years ago, I launched a show called The Fitness Oracle. And I want to be very clear about something up front. The problem wasn't the quality of the content. The advice was solid, the guests were knowledgeable, and the conversations had real value. What I didn't have, especially at the beginning, was an understanding of distribution. There was no system, no content engine, no intentional publishing strategy. I was recording episodes, publishing them, and hoping they would catch. Hoping consistency alone would be enough. Hoping the algorithm would eventually notice. And for a long time, I genuinely believed that was how this worked. It wasn't until much later, toward the end of that show, that I finally understood how critical distribution, systems, and feedback loops actually are. But by the time those lessons started to land, it was already too late. I'd run out of money, I didn't have the resources to keep experimenting, and I couldn't afford the time required for those lessons to compound. So the show didn't fail because the ideas were bad, it failed because the learning curve arrived after the runway was gone. That experience is the reason this series exists. This time, I'm not waiting to the end to understand what matters. I'm building the systems first. I'm documenting the learning as it happens, and I'm doing it publicly while the stakes are still manageable. I want to explain why this series is public, because doing this privately would be so much easier. It would be easier to disappear for a year, to come back once the numbers look respectable. And it definitely would be easier to tell the story after the outcome is known. But that's not how most people actually are building. The most important decisions happen long before anyone is watching. When there is no feedback, when the motivation dips, when you're not sure if the work is actually landing. Most creators don't fail publicly. They stall privately. They stop publishing quietly. They rationalize inconsistency. They tell themselves they'll restart when things calm down. But doing this publicly removes that escape hatch. It forces clarity, discipline, and honesty about what is and isn't working. There's another reason why this matters. Once creators cross a certain threshold, 10, 50, 100,000 followers, a viral moment, they unintentionally rewrite their origin story. The struggle gets simplified. The mistakes get cleaned up. The dead ends disappear. But the early phase is messy. It's inefficient. And it's where the most important lessons actually live. By documenting this now, while the numbers are still small, I'm preserving the part of the process that actually gets erased. Not to perform struggle, not to manufacture vulnerability, but to create a real-time record of how decisions are made without certainty, how systems evolve before they work, how discipline replaces motivation. This isn't an accountability theater, it's operational transparency. If you're building something alongside me, this gives you a reference point that's honest, not aspirational, not retrospective, and not optimized for clicks. And if this never becomes quote unquote impressive, that's fine. The value is in the process being visible, not in the outcome being celebrated. As I record this channel has 36 subscribers, but that number doesn't exist in a vacuum. I started this channel in August of 2025. It's been roughly 6 months. In that time, I've published 22 YouTube videos, 10 podcast episodes, all of this specific to YouTube alone. This isn't a brand new experiment. This is sustained effort without the momentum most people expect by now. And that's the uncomfortable truth phase creators rarely talk about. 6 months in, you're starting to ask hard questions. Is this working? Is this message clear? Am I wasting my time? This is usually where people quit, not because the work is wrong, but because the timeline didn't match the expectation. 36 subscribers after 6 months isn't a failure, it's data. It tells me what's landing. It tells me where distribution is breaking. And it tells me this phase still has lessons left to teach. Those 36 people didn't show up because of hype. They didn't show up because something went viral. They didn't show up because something resonated enough to earn trust. That's the phase I'm in. And this series exists to document what happens when you stay long enough to refine instead of restart. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further. This series is called The Road to 100. But this is not about chasing a number. I've been very vocal about this before, and I'll say it again here. Subscriber counts and download numbers are not as important as people make them out to be when they're disconnected from systems. But numbers do matter when they represent something real. And that's what 100 is. When I say 100, I'm not talking about status. I'm not talking about validation. And I'm definitely not talking about making it. 100 is not a flex. It's a signal. It's the first meaningful checkpoint where you can say, someone discovered this content. They understood what it was about. And they made a conscious decision to come back. Not because of hype. Not because of a viral moment. but because the message was clear and the value was consistent. That's it. For me, 100 represents proof of foundation. It's the point where the positioning is clear enough to be understood, the audience is the right audience, and the system behind the content is finally doing its job. It's the difference between publishing and hoping, and publishing with intent, between throwing content into the void and being deliberately building something that compounds. Here's the part most people skip over. If you can't reach 100 deliberately, you will not sustain 1,000 accidentally. Growth without foundation doesn't scale. It collapses. I know that because I lived it. So when I say the road to 100, what I'm really documenting is how learning how to distribute properly, building systems instead of relying on hope, publishing consistently with a plan, and proving to myself first that this machine actually works. Once that foundation is real, then the numbers can grow, but not before. This isn't about getting bigger. This is about getting real. So before I start publishing and experimenting, I need to be extremely clear about what matters and what doesn't. Because in early stage growth, it's easy to get lost chasing numbers that feel important but actually teach you nothing. So here's what we'll track. These are the metrics that will tell me if the work is actually landing, if my systems are working, and if my audience is real. Engaged subscribers and returning viewers, not just raw subscriber counts, but the people who come back. For example, if someone watches multiple episodes of my podcast or more than one YouTube video, that tells me the content is resonating. 36 subscribers might seem small, but each returning viewer is proof the system is starting to work. Retention and watch patterns. How long do people actually stick around in a video? Which parts of the episode hold on, and where do people drop off? If the first 30 seconds lose viewers consistently, that tells me the intro or hook needs work. Distribution effectiveness. I'll track which posts, shorts, or repurposed clips actually get traction. For example, does a podcast clip perform better on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Instagram? This will show me if my repurposing system, my 3, 6, 9, 12 day, week, month rule is hitting, or if I need to pivot. Audience response and behavior. Comments, messages, and DMs aren't vanity, they're feedback. Clicks to my newsletter, social media interactions, or other calls to action tell me whether people are connecting and taking next steps. Engagement signals trust, not attention. Here's what I won't track. These are the metrics that can distract, demoralize, or mislead not just me, everybody, especially at this stage. Raw subscriber counts. Hitting an arbitrary milestone without engagement is meaningless. 100 subscribers doesn't equal impact if they never watch or return. Views without context. 1,000 views on a video means nothing if the watch time is low or people don't engage. High numbers can feel like validation, but they don't teach you how to build systems that actually work. Likes, shares, or other social vanity metrics. They're nice to see, but they don't tell me whether the content is clear, useful, or being distributed effectively. Comparisons to other creators. Growth trajectories differ wildly. Their strategy won't translate to my audience or systems. The only benchmark that matters is whether my system is functional and scalable. So, by clearly separating what I track and from what I ignore, I can focus on learning, iterating, and improving. Avoid chasing illusions of success. Build a real foundation that will actually compound over time. This discipline will keep the series grounded in operational reality. It ensures that when I say the road to 100, I'm not celebrating a number, I'm celebrating a system that works. Every episode in the Road to 100 is built around 3 simple questions. But simple doesn't mean shallow. This is where you'll see the work in real time, without hype or filler. What did I publish since the last update? Every single episode, short, clip, or repurposed asset is logged. You'll see the cadence, the formats, and the decisions being published. This is about accountability to the process, not performance metrics. What worked, what didn't, and why. This is the heart of the series. Not everything lands. Not every repurposed clip drives engagement. Not every idea performs. I'll break down successes and failures in detail, showing exactly why something worked or why it flopped. This is the kind of insight most creators never share. The lessons that only show up when you stick it out long enough to experiment and iterate. What I'm changing before the next milestone. Insights lead to action. Every lesson informs a deliberate change to the system, the workflow, or the content strategy. You'll see why I tweak publishing times, adjust formats, or experiment with distribution, not randomly, but intentionally based on data and feedback. This keeps the series practical and forward-looking. It's always about refining the system, not celebrating vanity metrics. Here's what you won't see. No motivational speeches or feel-good fluff. Lessons learned, rewritten after the fact to look neat or impressive. Arbitrary milestones celebrated for the sake of optics. You won't see any of that. What you will get is operational transparency into the real work of building a system that can actually scale. A clear, repeatable lessons that anyone can apply, whether they're starting at zero or trying to build momentum. A living case study of experimentation, learning, and refinement in real time. By the end of every episode, if you followed along, you'll have a full understanding of the systems, the wins, the failures, and the next steps. You'll know exactly what worked, why it worked, and what I'll try next, without all the distraction of vanity metrics or noise. This is the baseline of the road to 100. Honest, data-driven, and operationally useful content every single time. Most creators don't fail because they lack talent, ideas, or effort. They fail because the early phase of building something meaningful is misunderstood. It's messy and it's invisible. Here's the reality. Effort alone isn't enough. Posting frequently doesn't guarantee traction. Without systems, without feedback loops, without intentional distribution, effort doesn't compound. It dissipates. In this series, you'll see what intentional effort looks like versus blind posting. Principles matter more than tactics. Viral hacks and algorithm tricks may create temporary spikes, but they don't create a foundation. Most creators focus on what's trendy instead of what's repeatable. In this series, you'll see how systems, consistency, and structure create growth that actually compounds. Persistence beats early wins. The most valuable lessons happen when growth is slow and silent. Most creators quit here, mistaking low engagement for failure. This series documents exactly how to persist adjust, and learn before compounding starts. If this series resonates with you, don't subscribe out of obligation. This isn't about hitting a number or joining a hype train. It's about joining a process. You should subscribe if you value the process over the hype. You understand that growth isn't flash or virality. It's a system built over time. You care about systems more than shortcuts. You want to see repeatable frameworks in action, not just tactics that might work once. That you're willing to build before being rewarded. And you know that effort, iteration, and compounding matter more than instant validation. If you want deeper insights, behind the scene thinkings, the breakdowns, the lessons that don't fit neatly into clips, that's where the newsletter comes in. The newsletter isn't a recap. It's where the full reasoning, the analysis, the nuance, the nuance of each experiment lives. It's where you'll see the lessons you can't capture in a short video, the context that makes every decision meaningful, and the strategies that actually compound over time. Subscribe to the channel to follow the journey. Sign up for the newsletter if you want the thinking behind the journey, the playbook that shows you how to build systems that actually work. That's it for the first episode of The Road to 100. No fluff, no motivational speeches, just a clear look at where I'm starting, what matters, and how I'm tracking progress. From here, every update will follow the same framework. What I published, what worked, what didn't, and why. What I'm adjusting before the next milestone. If you're here for real, actionable insight, not vanity metrics or hype, this series is for you. Remember, the numbers aren't the goals. The systems are. The lessons are. The process is. So stay tuned. Subscribe if this resonates. Check out the newsletter for deeper thinking. And most importantly, watch how a small, deliberate system grows over time. One step, one lesson, one iteration at a time. I'll see you in the next update.